This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South, national columnist at that website, joins us on halftime, as he usually does on a Monday. Connor, we're trying to pick up the pieces after an unexpected loss to Liberty. It was disheartening, to say the least, in the context of the season that Arkansas is playing and the direction of the program. There were some other big games, definitely, involving SEC teams, but I got to get your thoughts on Arkansas Liberty first.
Yeah, I was wondering about this. Is there,
I lost him for a moment there. I lost Connor for a moment there. Might have some bad, either that or he wasn't quite sure what to make sense of it, which I found myself doing the same thing occasionally here. Yeah, we'll get Connor back here for a moment, but I almost thought like he didn't really know what to say, and that's been my feeling at times throughout today's show. Yeah, we're getting him called.
Wait, I mean,
is on the up and up.
Be a little speechless after this. It was a good week for a college. For a college football fan, there were some fun games out there.
We got you back, Connor. Sorry about that.
My bad. I don't know what happened there. I was trying to think about this in the context of what that game was. 2-touchdown favorite. Arkansas coming off of consecutive impressive road showings. Is that the worst win or worst loss rather of the Sam Pittman era? I mean, in terms of how deflating that was, yeah, it just felt like. And I understand, when they got the number next to them, and you're an AP top 25 team, that's not going to be like in the history books. We won't remember it in that same sort of way. But just how it happened. I mean, to come out and look that flat, and an offensive line who, coming into this one, PFF had Arkansas's offensive line graded as the highest in the country. And they just got dominated up front. I mean, Hugh Freeze for his offense. And if it would have been one thing if this is kind of a back-and-forth game and Hugh is just kind of in his bag and he's dialing it up. But, man, they just got pushed around. And that's so disheartening to see, because what I think we've praised Sam Pittman for is having his team kind of buy in and locked in and disciplined. And that team did not show up ready to play. And they looked like they thought they were going to be able to kind of run through things and it was going to be a cakewalk. And I think it was, kind of a top-down failure. And there's not one specific player, one specific aspect of this team that you could look at and say, oh, yeah, it was entirely on them. I think it was on everyone, and I think it's really tough for Arkansas fans to stomach.
I think you're right. Fair. I mean, you win as a team, lose as a team. I think the offensive line probably played their worst game. KJ didn't look sharp. I don't know if it was a change in the tide or the moon. But it was tough to watch. Do you think it's just Liberty is better than what we thought, and Arkansas maybe we're missing Traylon Burks? I don't know. Maybe we're just not as good as we thought.
I think it's part of it, and Liberty deserves credit. Like they absolutely do. I mean, they showed up really ready to roll, and Jonathan Bennett, a guy who came into the year as third string quarterback. Looks pretty good, and still you're able to kind of look up and think, all right, well, Arkansas has a chance because we've seen this movie before, and it was shades of Missouri State. And I said coming into the week, it was probably unfair to make that comparison, even though, comparing Petrino to Hugh Freeze is kind of an easy dot to connect for SEC fans. But I think it was still an unfair comparison to make because one was obviously an FCS team and one has actually earned its way into the AP Top 25. But that's kind of where they've been able to hang their hat this year is defensively. And, Arkansas should have been able to run the football. That's what a lot of this comes down to for me. And it's almost like they get into some of these spots, and when KJ isn't used as a runner as much because it's perceived lesser competition, they kind of get out of their offensive way, and they just look really out of sorts. And we've seen that happen throughout this year. So, yeah, I mean, it's a problem because there's not one thing that they can really fall back on, and they're not a team that is built to come back from a 3-touchdown deficit. They're just not. That's not the way the offense is set up, even though I think KJ has made some nice mid-season strides in the passing game. So, yeah, it was, I mean, one of those days in which you're just kind of scratching your head going, man, this is not exactly what we had in mind. And you thought Arkansas was going to be kind of in the clear and set up to have a nice little run end the season.
Connor, please tell me you think LSU is primed for a letdown. Back-to-back weeks, rushing the field. They're in command of the SEC West. Brian Kelly is shedding tears with fans running behind him and everything. Primed for a letdown this Saturday, right?
No. No. Look, I mean, guys, I would love to sit here and pretend like this LSU team is going to keep Arkansas in this game for 4 quarters. And you know what? Maybe they will, because LSU has had a bit of a tendency to get out to some slow starts, although they've kind of worked past that. If you look at what they've done in recent weeks, even coming out as strong as they did in that game in the Swamp a few weeks ago, I think LSU has turned the corner in a big, big way. And it's because, you know, a subject that we talked about a lot with KJ Jefferson coming into the year, Jaden Daniels has had to learn how to trust his receivers. Kayshon Boutte came into the year as a preseason All-American, and for the first part of the season, man, he was uninvolved. And instead, you're seeing now Jaden Daniels trust him, trust all the guys that they have on the outside, you know, Jack Besh, Brian Thomas, and defensively, they've kind of figured out their identity with Matt House. The matchup that you're going to want to watch, Harold Perkins, the 5-star true freshman who just gave Bryce Young everything he can handle as a spy, pass rusher. He does it all. And they kind of just say, hey, that quarterback's holding on to the football. You go after him, and you get him, and you make sure that he doesn't take over. And that's what he's going to try and do against KJ Jefferson. LSU's playing some tremendous football. The job that Brian Kelly has done this year, you know, everybody comes in talking about, you know, he's not a culture fit and he's not going to belong in Louisiana, blah, blah, blah. No, dude's just a winner. He's won, you know, nearly 300 football games as a college head coach for a reason. And I think LSU is poised to be able to get a win against Arkansas.
Well, I had Georgia over Tennessee. That was it was a tough game for whoever. I really had whoever that game was had the home team would probably win it. But Georgia looked good. What were your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I did not have Georgia against Tennessee, and I've been on the record for the last 4 months saying that I thought Tennessee was ready for this. This is Tennessee's time. I thought the way that they matched up on the outside, if you're going to beat Georgia, you know, similar to what we saw with the Tennessee-Alabama game, you know, if you're going to beat a team like that, you need to get touchdowns when that opposing defense makes those mistakes and they have those busts in coverage, and Tennessee is capable of exploiting that. But the defensive performance that we saw from Georgia, I don't think there's been a better one from anybody in the playoff era. I mean, it was truly
they were uncomfortable
remarkable.
the whole time. You're right. The entire time, Tennessee looked uncomfortable.
Like, that to me, we haven't seen them at all look like that for even a quarter in some of these games. And in a rhythm offense like that, you know, they go up tempo just like Arkansas does in a different way, obviously, but man, it just felt like Georgia was so good at getting home. They disguised blitzes. When Jalen Carter, the preseason All-American, is playing at that kind of a level, it just makes such a difference. He was the one who had the hit on Hooker. That should have been a safety. I don't know how it was.
What was that? That we talk about bad. That was a bad call by the refs.
Just a terrible call. He spent 20 minutes reviewing it. You're like, what are we doing?
And still got it wrong. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, terrible. But Georgia is far and away the number one team in the country. They have the clearest path to a national championship. That all but locked up a playoff berth for them. In my opinion, that is going to make their case so much more convincing come Selection Sunday. And I think if you're picking against anybody right now to win a national championship, I think that's just saying that you haven't watched Georgia a whole lot.
The SEC is in the best position to get a one-loss team into the playoff. And there's going to be a one-loss team in the playoff this year. There's no doubt about that now. So, you know, Tennessee still has this chance, you know, and maybe in that case, you know, the team that makes the SEC championship game, whether it be, you know, it's going to be Georgia now, and it might be LSU, probably will be LSU. Like, LSU can't get there with 2 losses. Tennessee cannot play for the SEC championship and still make it.
So that's where it gets interesting, because LSU still has a path to the playoffs. LSU definitely still has a path to the playoff, because if you beat Alabama and Georgia in the same season, you're going to get in. I mean, 2017 Auburn was the best example of that, a 2-loss team that had to beat Georgia in the SEC championship to get there, but had 2 losses coming into that game and would have made the playoff had they won that game. Obviously, it's a different year, different context, but yeah, I think LSU in that conversation with Tennessee is is a difficult one because LSU would have 2 losses, and one of them being a blowout loss at home to Tennessee. So how would you tell that Tennessee team that it's not worthy? And if LSU beats Georgia at a neutral site, it would just make things really, really complicated for the selection committee. But yes, the SEC right now has 4 teams that still playoff life. If you include Ole Miss, who, oh, by the way, gets to play Alabama this weekend. We'll see if Alabama's angry, or we'll see if Alabama's a little bit disinterested.
Who do you think outside of the SEC is it? Can Michigan, are they for real? They looked a little sluggish early and then kind of got it going on. Ohio State, same kind of thing. Can you think either one of those guys can compete with the LSU, Tennessee, Georgias?
I think Ohio State has the best chance to. Ohio State was my preseason pick to win a national championship because of what Jim Knowles was bringing over from Oklahoma State. They paid him $2 million to basically reinvent that defense, and he has. But the problem with Ohio State so far, and we saw it in the first half in a very windy, rainy game at Northwestern, is that their offense has been a little bit touch and go. And I don't know how much of that you can just pin on not having Jackson Smith and Jigba, but it just seems like their offense has been a little bit more herky-jerky than what we expected coming into this year. And so, Ohio State, I think, can compete with those teams. I don't think Michigan can because, look, I was there in Miami last year, and that wasn't a team on the level of Georgia. It just was not. And there was no doubt who the better team was by day's end. And I think that this year it would be set up for a very similar situation, even though they obviously have the 5-star quarterback this year, J.J. McCarthy. But, yeah, I think Ohio State is the only team really outside of the SEC that can win a national championship.
Let's see. 2 losses for Alabama this year. They're razor-thin losses, both on the road. Could have won either one of those games. So, I mean, I hear people talking about the foundations of the Alabama program are shaking and, the dynasty is over and all of that. They're this close. They're this close to being undefeated. Yeah,
but let me frame it this way because, yes, you're exactly right. And if you want to look at it through that lens, that's perfectly fine. But Alabama, since the start of 2021, 10 of their 14 SEC games have been a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. They have been playing with fire since the start of last year, and that is what this team has done. And more often than not, they've gotten away with it. They're 7-3 in those games, and that includes losing this past weekend to LSU. But I mean, go to the A&M game where A&M's got to play on the goal line to win the game, and it's a terrible play call. And they've had these spots where Texas, if they miss that kick late, we're talking about Alabama losing that game to Texas even without Quinn Ewers. So. They have been in these spots before where you can't expect to go undefeated when you're playing in such tight games late, even when you do have the best player on the planet to be able to bail you out of those situations in Bryce Young. And you run into a team that on both sides of the ball just isn't afraid of you. And you run into, and this is the key thing, you run into a coach that's not afraid of you. Brian Kelly going for 2 in that spot, all or nothing play in that spot. Man, I can't give him enough credit. And he dialed up the exact right look to throw to a true freshman tight end. I mean, just incredible stuff to put faith in his guys like that. So, I think Alabama's been playing with fire, and we've seen the cracks in the foundation for a bit now, but they've just been able to overcome them in the past.
All right, Cubs fan. Dusty won a World Series, not with the Cubs. Got one with the Astros. I feel great for him. I think Cubs fans probably would feel, God, man, it's 5 teams for crying out loud. I think all of them feel good for him. They just wish it happened with their team.
I know, man. Like I've always felt so bad for Dusty and watching him in that inevitable, he inevitably will pound his fist on whatever sort of bench structure he's leaning on when his team loses in the playoffs, and then he swallows a toothpick or something like that. And you're just like, oh, Dusty, man, it doesn't have to be like this. That's the lone silver lining, I think, of watching the Astros win a World Series is that Dusty Baker finally gets to exercise those demons and win one. But, yes, happy for Dusty. That's about my only real interest from a rooting standpoint in this World Series.
Yeah. Hey, Connor, appreciate you. Have a great week, and we'll revisit again next Monday.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
You got it, Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. I tried to set him up, Matt. It was like, come on, look at all these reasons why there's a letdown for LSU. He wasn't having any of it. Not one bit.
He does not. Yeah, Alabama. He was ready for. He was like you had emailed him that question. He had the stats. He knows his stuff, man. I like talking with him every week. He's good.
Football is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.